So now I'd like to introduce our first speaker who will share how Indigenous knowledge and sovereignty is vital in deconstructing our current systems of oppression. Kanyon Sayers Roods is a Costanoan, Ohlone Mutsun, and Chumash public speaker and consultant. Kanyon also goes by her given native name, Coyote Woman. With a background in web design and interactive media, Kanyon has been using her knowledge of Indigenous insights and leadership to initiate and facilitate conversations that bridge the gap between Indigenous pedagogies and corporate and state entities. So welcome, Kanyon. Can I invite you onto this virtual stage?
Thank you. Mishmin Tuhis, Kanrakat Kanyon, Coyote Woman, Sayers Roods. An introduction in my Mutsun Ohlone language. I currently am in Tamian Ohlone territory. Some of you may recognize this space as San Jose Valley. I traditionally come from Mutsun Ohlone territory. My home is Indian Canyon Nation, which happens to be the only federally recognized Indian country between Sonoma and Santa Barbara along central coastal California. I am daughter of tribal chairwoman Anne Marie Sayers, and I recognize my privilege being raised on the land of my ancestors, where my grandmothers have always been from. And being raised in a both traditional and intertribal environment where culture sharing and recognizing Indigenous protocol is a fundamental way of life. I truly believe that through culture sharing, we all can celebrate our elders, our ancestors, and recognize that all of us are Ama Piritakawas, which is people of this land. We are taking steps to acknowledge Indigenous protocol, to acknowledge the historical people of this land, and we in community are standing together as people of this land. My mother and my grandmother have always taught me that when song, ceremony, and dancing stops, so does the earth. I too believe that. And so I would like to offer a song to help ground myself and to offer a small bit of ceremony in this circle. This is a grandmother song to honor our grandmother, their grandmothers, and in all Mother Earth. For without them and without her, we would not be here. We share this time and this space together, and it's with that humility, that gratitude, that present mindedness that I offer this song here to all of you. This is Kanyon's grandmother song. I will use my regalia as an instrument today, my medicine, my necklace, because Indigenous peoples, we do not wear costumes. Moi moi kawa, moi moi ka, moi moi no, moi moi ko, moi moi yo na yo konale, moi moi yo konale, moi moi yo kawa. Moi moi no, moi moi oko, moi moi ona yo konale, moi moi yo konale, moi moi oko, moi moi ko ona moi moi konale. Song and breath, go to spirit. And oh, if you ever hear a California say, oh, it's how we end prayers and songs and ceremonies, welcoming energy and sending prayers off in a good way. So you might be in other circles say, oh, I thank you for your time and willingness to join the circle. As a California Indigenous two-spirit artist, I have spent my life in truth in history. So I find it very important that we voice the importance of honoring native land and recognizing Indigenous protocol. Because today we follow a common protocol, such as an example would be when we may want to borrow a cup of sugar and visit a neighbor. We don't walk right into their kitchen and take it. Most of us don't. It's very important that we seek a consensual engagement. Some of us will go up to the door, knock on the door, find out if our neighbor is home, find out if they're willing to interact with us, seek a consensual interaction, and then find out if it's possible to borrow that cup of sugar. Traditionally, my ancestors didn't have all of these buildings and fences and walls, but we still respected each other's territory. So I find it important today that we take these steps, that we acknowledge Indigenous protocol by becoming familiar with the Indigenous peoples, histories of these spaces, places in today's post-colonial settler environment. I truly believe that when honoring truth in history, that we can learn from Indigenous pedagogies so we may learn how to strategize sustainable futures, because it's very, very important that we not only recognize how our actions and words impact our community, our environment, but 7 generations in the future. And sometimes that means saying no to those quarter-end dividends. It sometimes means saying no to profitable turnaround. We need to consider how our actions and our words impact all sacred living systems. We as humans need to recognize that the animals and the plants, they are the first people of the earth. We are the first humans, but the first beings that were here. We as humans were given life to be good stewards, to take care of the earth, and to recognize how all of us are part of that ecological system. I will bring up topics like Western settler mindset, which happens to hold a definition to me. To me, Western settler colonial mindset is to be negligent of the sacred, to be engaged in a capitalistic, materialistic, disposable society that has blinders on, focused on the economy, focused on resource extraction of both natural resources and of Black and brown bodies. It's not accountable. It's not humble. And it is not reciprocal. That mindset denies that we need to be accountable to recognizing all of our relatives. These plants, these animals are all living beings. How are we being accountable to these sacred living systems? Are we caring about where our food comes from? What it took for it to get to us? Are we respecting the life that's lived for the gift that's given? I visit classrooms of 3rd and 4th graders. I get to talk about genocide to these young beings. But I use humor and I use empathy to talk to them about truth in history. Because if we avoid it, if we sweep it under the rug, we are not helping. I do believe that if you are in a position of making decisions that impact the environment, that impact the community, that impact any of these systems, if you do not know the history of the land that you are on, more than 50, 150, 250, 500 plus years, if you do not know the history of the land, the first name of the indigenous peoples, the indigenous pedagogies of which native peoples tended the land, I don't think you're coming to the table fully informed. Because I do know that my ancestors used cultural burning as a method to encourage the ecological diversity on this land. It helps the oaks. Right now, we are suffering from sudden oak death and millions of dollars of people with that colonial mindset, that Western settler colonial mindset of what that science is, are trying to find an antidote, a solution, something to possibly spray or solve for sudden oak death. Yet it's an ecological issue. We in community should be recognizing how humans are a part of that system. For many years, many of us try to divorce ourselves from that system. Yet when other people talk about living systems, I'll use hunter and predator. If there are coyotes and there are rabbits, if there are too many rabbits, the coyotes can't keep that in balance. So the rabbits will take over and their food source will become limited. Same thing happens when too many predators exist, not enough prey. Too many predators, and then they can't sustain their population. Us as humans are in that system, yet how are we accounting for how our decisions and our actions play a role? So I truly believe that when we honor truth in history, when we all can figure out ways of decolonizing what we've been taught and re-indigenizing our approaches to making solutions, I find it to be a reasonable way to consider how all of us can be good ancestors in training, how all of us can honor truth in history. To me, it's all relative. I personally, when I was a youngster, I did not like the education system I was brought up in. I didn't appreciate learning about these settlers bragging and boasting how they colonized and took over. And it was a very one-sided narrative. I didn't see myself or my community or the diverse perspectives of how things came to be. So many of us have been brought up in an environment that we don't know what we don't know. We do need to be kind with each other, yet we still need to be assertive. When it comes to honoring truth in history, we all can take steps. Those of us who are voices of the community, those of us who are educators, those of us who are decision makers and organizers and agency representatives, all of us can be proactive to honoring truth in history. So I'm just another community member, a consultant, an Indigenous Two-Spirit voice. I'm ambiguous with my pronouns, she, they, coyote. and I'm here to share a little bit of my perspective. If we gathered in person at CSUMB, we would be gathering in Rumsian Ohlone territory. And I'm trying to remember how much time I have. I want to close my perspective to the best of my ability in offering a song in my language, and the word is about hummingbirds. If we were in Monterey, the first language of that land is Rumsian. And the way my Rumsian relatives say hummingbird is they say humaya. Humaya is the hummingbird. In my language, we say humunya. And so I want to offer a little hummingbird songs. So this is a little Mutsun hummingbird song. Humunya, humunya, weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Humunya, 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 weha, weha. Humunya, 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 weha, weha, ho. Oh, oh, oh. So I invite you to learn about the native peoples of the land that you are on, to learn about the history of these spaces and places in today's post-colonial settler environment, and consider ways that you can educate and offer insight to your audiences, to your community, to be more inclusive, and to recognize how we can offer this for justice, equity, diversity. It's really important that we honor truth in history. I'm just one Indigenous person, and I've learned so much from my relatives. I am greatly appreciative to allies, advocates, what is the other word? Accomplices, and co-conspirators of beautiful futures where we can be humble and appreciative and accountable. So I find it really important that no matter what we do, we honor truth in history. So thank you for sharing and having my voice. I'm honored to share space with all of you. So
Thank you so much, Kanyon, for sharing your song with us and your knowledge on re-indigenizing and honoring truth and history. I hope that we can all continue these conversations within our circles.